As I drove down the snowy highway toward my son's house in Mississauga, a bottle of ice wine from Niagara tucked safely in the passenger seat, my accountant called. The dashboard showed Helen's name flashing on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Thanksgiving dinner was in an hour, and I didn't want to be late. Harold, don't sign anything tonight. Her voice was sharp, urgent, in a way I'd never heard from her in 20 years. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. Helen, I'm on my way to my son's place. Can this wait until Monday? It cannot wait. This involves Michael directly. You won't believe what I found in the paperwork he sent over. I pulled onto the shoulder of the 401, cars rushing past me through the early November darkness. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. What paperwork? What are you talking about? Just promise me you won't sign anything. Not tonight. Not until we talk. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The ice wine felt heavier somehow as I carried it up my son's driveway in Burlington. Fresh snow had fallen that morning, and someone had shoveled a neat path to the front door. Probably Michael. He'd always been particular about appearances. My daughter-in-law opened the door before I could knock. Harold, right on time. We were just saying how punctual you always are. Sandra's smile was wide, but something about it reminded me of the real estate agents who used to circle my stores like vultures, always asking if I'd considered selling. Wouldn't miss Thanksgiving, I said, stepping inside where the heat from the fireplace hit me immediately. Their house always felt like a showroom. Everything coordinated, nothing out of place. Michael emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Dad, good to see you. We shook hands. When had we stopped hugging? Dinner's almost ready. Turkey looks perfect this year. I set the ice wine on their granite counter and settled onto their leather couch, immediately worried about tracking in slush from my boots. The living room had that staged quality, like a furniture catalog. Everything matched. Nothing looked lived in. You look tired, Sandra said, sitting across from me. Her eyes moved over my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Are you sleeping okay? Getting enough rest with the stores? I sleep fine. Business is good. It's just that at your age, health becomes so important. She leaned forward. Have you been having trouble remembering things lately? Names? Appointments? I stared at her. Remembering things? Sandra's just concerned, Michael cut in quickly, sitting beside his wife. Their knees touched, some silent signal passing between them. You've been running those hardware stores for 35 years. That's a long time to carry everything yourself. Don't you think it's time to slow down? Let someone else handle the pressure? I watched him carefully. My son had never shown interest in the business before. He'd gone into finance, made his own way at a bank downtown. What are you really asking, Michael? Just worried about you, Dad. His tongue darted across his lips. What if something happened to you? Does anyone else know how to access your accounts? The safety deposit boxes? Have you updated your will recently? The questions came too fast, too specific. Sandra's hand squeezed Michael's arm. Another signal. They'd rehearsed this. I'm managing fine, I said slowly. Of course you are. Sandra's voice had gone sharp. But Michael is right. Families should look out for each other. That's what Thanksgiving is about. Dinner was turkey with all the fixings. I barely tasted any of it. Every time I looked up, Michael was watching me. When I excused myself to use the washroom, I heard urgent whispering from the dining room. Walking back, I caught Sandra's eyes following my every step, measuring something I couldn't name. More wine? She offered, already pouring before I answered. I made it through dessert, pumpkin pie, store-bought, despite Sandra claiming she'd made it herself. I stood to leave. This was nice. We should do it more often. You're not driving back to Toronto alone, are you? Sandra's question came out like an accusation. The highway can be treacherous this time of year. Maybe you should stay over. I've been driving Canadian winters for 45 years. Of course. Michael walked me to the door. Text when you get home so we know you made it, okay? I nodded, suddenly desperate to leave. Reaching for my coat on the rack, my hand brushed against something that slipped from the pocket onto the floor. An iPad. The old family iPad we used to share photos on. The one I thought we'd gotten rid of years ago. Dad, wait, that's Michael started. Sorry, knocked it over. I picked it up, handed it back. But not before I saw the notification on the screen. Message from David Thornton. Documents ready for filing. Evaluation scheduled. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove back toward Toronto. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Evaluation, filing, documents. I'd seen those words before, years ago, when my neighbor's children had tried to have him declared incompetent to seize his farm. Helen's warning echoed in my mind. Don't sign anything. Something was very wrong, and whatever it was, it had been planned carefully, discussed with lawyers, scheduled for evaluation. My own son. The realization settled over me like a January frost as I merged onto the 403. That iPad notification screamed danger with every silent kilometer. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Around midnight, I stopped pretending and pulled out my laptop. I still had access to the family cloud account, the one we'd set up years ago to share photos from holidays. Michael had probably forgotten I could see anything synced to that iPad. The shared notes opened like a door into another world. Conversations with someone named David Thornton at a law firm in Hamilton. Another thread with a Dr. Patterson's office. All of it spelled out in casual shorthand that made my blood run cold. Capacity assessment procedures in one note. Power of attorney application ready in another. A note from 3 weeks ago. Once we establish he's incapable of managing finances, full control transfers within 60 days. 3 weeks. They'd been planning this for at least 3 weeks. My coffee went cold on the kitchen table as dawn broke through my window overlooking the ravine. I'd read everything twice. The notes went back months, not weeks. Strategy discussions, timeline adjustments, Sandra pushing to move faster, Michael urging patience. By 7 in the morning, I pulled out my phone and started taking screenshots. Every note, every date stamp. 35 years running a business teaches you to document everything. By 9:30, I was driving toward Helen's office on Bay Street. She was already waiting when I arrived. Files spread across her desk. Harold, sit down. Her face was grim. Your son sent me paperwork last week. Said you wanted him added to your business accounts, that you'd asked him to help manage finances because you were having memory problems. That's a lie. I never asked for any of that. I know. That's why I called you. She slid a document across the desk. Look at page 3. There was my signature on a consent form, dated 2 weeks ago. The handwriting was close, very close, but the slant of the H was wrong. The pressure on the W was too heavy. I never signed this. I suspected as much. Harold, this is forgery. This is fraud. I stared at the document, my mind already racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. What do I do? First, we protect your assets. Then we fight back. The morning after meeting Helen, I sat across from Robert Chen at Chen & Associates, a law firm Helen had recommended. His office occupied the 15th floor of a building in the financial district, overlooking the gray November waters of Lake Ontario. Mr. Morrison, Chen said, reviewing the screenshots I'd printed. This is serious. If your son files for guardianship before you protect yourself, the court could appoint a temporary guardian. You could lose access to your own bank accounts while this plays out. The words hit like a physical blow. How long do we have? Chen scrolled through the images on his computer. Days, maybe a week, based on these notes. They mentioned filing soon. That was written 4 days ago. He grabbed his phone, punching the intercom. Jennifer, clear my afternoon. Prepare emergency trust documents. Chen pulled up Ontario statutes on his computer, walking me through the nightmare scenario. Once capacity proceedings started, assets could be frozen pending evaluation. Court-appointed assessors, psychological examinations, legal limbo that could stretch for months. We're going to create an irrevocable living trust, he explained. Transfer everything the hardware stores, your house, investment accounts into the trust. You'll be the primary trustee. But here's the key. We'll appoint an independent professional trustee as successor, not a family member. Someone who can't be manipulated. Over the next 3 days, I lived in Chen's office. We drafted documents, revised clauses, built what he called fortress protection. I transferred ownership of Morrison's hardware, all 4 locations across the GTA, into the Morrison Family Trust. My house in Rosedale, my investment portfolio, the cottage on Lake Muskoka, everything. The trust document specifically excludes family members from trustee positions, Chen explained as I reviewed the final draft. Even if they get a court order, the assets are held by the trust, not by you personally. They'd have to prove the trust itself was invalid. Can they do that? Not easily. Not when we've documented everything properly. I also scheduled medical examinations. If Michael was going to claim I was incapable, I needed proof otherwise. At Toronto General Hospital, I submitted to a battery of tests. A neurologist named Dr. Sarah Williams had me recite number sequences backward, draw clock faces, answer logic puzzles, walk heel-to-toe down a hallway. Mr. Morrison, your cognitive function tests place you in the superior range for your age group, she said, reviewing the results. Your memory, executive function, and reasoning skills are excellent. There is absolutely no indication of any impairment whatsoever. I scheduled a second examination at Sunnybrook. 2 days later, same results, same confirmation. I collected the written reports like ammunition. On the 4th day, I met Patricia Webb at Ontario Fiduciary Services. Gray-haired, professionally detached, she reviewed the scope of assets that would fall under her oversight if I became truly incapacitated. You understand I'm independent, she said. I have a fiduciary duty to you, not to your family members. If someone tries to manipulate the trust for their benefit, I'm legally obligated to resist. That's exactly what I need. By evening, I sat in my home office reviewing the completed documents, trust agreements, medical reports, original screenshots. I created a secure folder on my computer labeled Defense, uploading scanned copies of everything. My finger hovered over the mouse as I stared at Michael's name in the shared notes. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but something else was growing alongside it, something colder. Robert, this protects my assets, I'd said during the signing. But what about justice? What about making sure they don't try this with someone else's father? Chen had paused, choosing his words carefully. Right now, we're building your defense. What comes after that's your decision. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. The defense was solid. My assets were protected. Michael could file his petition, and it would collapse against the fortress we'd built. But was that enough? The question sat in my chest like a stone as darkness fell outside my window, Lake Ontario twinkling with city lights in the distance. And I realized with absolute clarity that protection wasn't sufficient anymore. I wanted consequences. 6 days later, I stood in my bedroom, adjusting my collar in the mirror. Michael had called about a family dinner at his house. Said he wanted to make things right after Thanksgiving felt off. I'd been practicing my expression all afternoon, cautious optimism mixed with a grandfather's desperate hope for family healing. My phone rang. Robert Chen's name appeared on the screen. Robert, I'm actually heading out to... Sir, you need to see this. His voice was tight, urgent in a way I'd never heard before. I have a family commitment. Can this wait until... This is precisely about your family. Check your email. I'm sending something now. I sat on the bed as my phone chimed. The attachment loaded slowly. A PDF with official Ontario Superior Court letterhead. My eyes tracked across the title. In the matter of the guardianship of property and personal care of Harold James Morrison. The room tilted. Harold, are you there? I'm reading it. Michael had filed an application with the Ontario Superior Court that morning. While I'd been choosing what shirt to wear to our reconciliation dinner, my son had been submitting documents to a judge claiming I suffered from advanced dementia and couldn't manage my affairs. The application was thorough, detailed, devastating, if it were true. Alleged incidents of confusion at my hardware stores, conversations I supposedly couldn't follow, appointments I'd missed, employees I'd failed to recognize. All fiction, reported financial mismanagement, unpaid invoices, bounced checks, suspicious withdrawals, complete fabrication. My stores were thriving. I hadn't bounced a check in 30 years. Then I reached Dr. William Patterson's capacity assessment, dated 2 weeks ago. The patient presents with significant cognitive decline consistent with moderate to severe dementia, Patterson had written. Memory impairment, disorientation, inability to manage complex financial matters. Recommendation: immediate protective intervention, including guardianship to prevent financial exploitation or self-harm. I'd never met Dr. Patterson, never been evaluated by him, never even heard his name until I'd seen it in those synced notes. "Harold, look at page 14, Chen said. I scrolled down. There was my signature on a consent form for capacity assessment, dated 3 weeks ago. The penmanship was close, very close, but the angle of the H was wrong. The loop on the M was too tight. I never signed this, I said quietly. I know, that's forgery. That's a criminal offense. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were perfectly still, which was somehow worse. Michael filed a guardianship application this morning, Chen continued. He's asking for emergency, temporary control over your property and finances. The hearing is scheduled for next week, but I'm supposed to have dinner with him tonight. He said he wanted to apologize, to make things right. That dinner was part of the plan. Look at page 14 of the application. He claims you've been receptive to family assistance and agreeable to signing necessary documents. He was going to get more signatures tonight to strengthen his case. I walked to my home office, pulling up the document on my computer for a larger view. I read every page carefully, cataloging the lies. Then I retrieved my medical reports from the desk drawer and placed them beside the keyboard. Dr. Patterson's fabricated evaluation was supposedly from 2 weeks ago. My actual examinations at Toronto General and Sunnybrook, conducted after I discovered the plot, showed perfect cognitive function. The dates told the story. Michael had paid Patterson to write a fraudulent evaluation. Then he'd forged my signature on a consent form to make it look legitimate. All while planning the dinner where he'd get me to sign more documents, probably disguised as family trust papers or healthcare directives. I picked up my phone and called Michael. Dad, are you on your way? His voice was warm, concerned, completely false. I made my voice weak, apologetic. Michael, I'm so sorry. I've come down with something terrible. Feels like the flu. I don't think I can make it tonight. A pause. Just a fraction too long. The flu? That's unfortunate. Are you sure you shouldn't go to the hospital? I could come over and... No. I injected a tremor into my voice. I just need rest. We'll reschedule soon. Right. Sure. He agreed too quickly, frustration bleeding through his careful concern. Get some rest, Dad. I ended the call and sat in the darkness of my office, the glow from my computer screen illuminating the evidence of my son's betrayal. He thought he was setting a trap for me. He thought I'd walk in blind and sign away my life while he watched and smiled. But I'd seen the trap. I knew the bait. I understood the mechanism. And now, sitting alone in my house with proof of their conspiracy burning on my screen, I realized something that should have terrified me, but instead felt cold and clarifying. The war had begun. I just needed to fight it smarter than they expected. The next morning, I needed to clear my head. The forged signature kept appearing in my mind. That wrong angle on the H. The too tight loop on the M. I drove to the Evergreen Brickworks, an old industrial site turned community space in the Don Valley. They had community gardens there, and I'd rented a small plot years ago, mostly neglected since my wife passed. The November air was crisp, frost still clinging to the dead leaves along the pathways. I walked to my plot, surveying the mess of overgrown weeds and forgotten tomato cages. You'll need to clear all that before the ground freezes solid. I looked up. A woman in her early 60s stood a few feet away, wearing gardening gloves and a sensible wool coat. She had kind eyes and silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back practically. I know. I've been neglecting it. Grief will do that. Her voice was gentle, matter-of-fact. I recognized the signs. Lost my husband 4 years ago. My plot looked worse than yours for 2 seasons. Something about her manner made me lower my guard. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she was a stranger who didn't know Michael, Didn't know my business. Didn't have any stake in my life. I'm Evelyn, she said, extending her gloved hand. Harold, within 20 minutes, we'd moved to a bench overlooking the gardens, and I was explaining everything. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. My friend Margaret in Ottawa, her nephew, tried something similar 8 years ago, she said. Filed paperwork claiming she couldn't manage her affairs. What saved her was evidence, daily logs, witness statements, proof she was living a normal, competent life. I have medical evaluations, I said. Clean bill of health from 2 doctors. That's excellent, but you also need to show ongoing capacity. Are you documenting your business decisions? Keeping records of your daily activities? The court wants to see ongoing capability, not just a snapshot. She pulled a small notebook from her coat pocket and started writing. Not about my story, but practical actions. Daily activity logs, witness statements from employees, photographs of me engaged in complex business tasks. I was a social worker for 30 years, she explained. I've seen capacity assessments go both ways. The ones that succeed for the person always have thorough documentation. My phone rang. James Thompson, my main supplier in Vancouver. Harold, just checking in. Everything okay? Someone called asking about our business relationship. Said they were concerned about billing issues. I felt ice form in my chest. What billing issues? That's what I said. There aren't any. You've never missed a payment in 20 years. I just thought it was strange. I thanked him and hung up. Evelyn watched my expression change. 15 minutes later, my accountant Helen called. Got a strange inquiry from your daughter-in-law. She was asking about your financial management, whether I'd noticed any confusion in your instructions lately. The third call came from Dave Rodriguez, my store manager at the Scarborough location for 15 years. Boss, I got a weird call from Michael today. Dave sounded uncomfortable. He was asking if you've been forgetting things at the stores, making odd decisions. I told him you're sharp as ever, but I thought you should know. What exactly did he ask? If you'd been confused about orders, missing meetings, that kind of thing. I shut it down fast. But Harold, what's going on? I ended the call and stared at my phone. 3 calls in an hour, I said quietly. 3 of my key business relationships, all within days of me canceling that dinner. They're poisoning the well, Evelyn said, her expression hardening with recognition. Calling your business contacts, planting doubts. Then I need to document everything. Every call, every conversation. She tore a page from her notebook and wrote her phone number. Call me if you need someone to talk to. Someone who understands these situations, what you're facing. It's not just legal. It's psychological warfare. I stood, pocketing her number. Thank you for listening, for the advice. Don't let them isolate you. Her eyes were serious. That's how these things work. They cut you off from your support system, make everyone doubt you. Stay connected. Stay visible. Keep living your life competently and publicly. Driving home along the DVP, I made a mental list of every business relationship Michael and Sandra might target. My banker, my insurance agent, the commercial leasing company for my store locations. Anyone who might testify about my capability or lack thereof if this went to trial. They weren't just attacking me in court. They were attacking my reputation, my credibility, the foundation of trust I'd spent 35 years building in the Ontario business community. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car, phone in hand. Evelyn's words echoed. Psychological warfare. Fine. If they wanted war on multiple fronts, I'd fight on multiple fronts. But first, I needed to understand what made them this desperate. People don't forge signatures and destroy their relationship with their father without serious motivation. I needed to know what Michael and Sandra were really running from. The next morning, I sat across from Robert Chen as he introduced a woman named Victoria Reeves, early 40s, sharp suit, carrying a leather portfolio that looked well used. Victoria's helped me with corporate investigations, Chen explained. Background checks, financial due diligence. She's thorough and discreet. I authorized a full financial background check on Michael and Sandra. Whatever was driving them to commit fraud, I needed to understand it. Look for debt, I told Reeves. Look for pressure. Find out why they need my money so desperately. 3 days later, Reeves returned with a thick folder. I read it in Chen's office, using a yellow highlighter to mark key figures. Michael had lost $220,000 in cryptocurrency investments. Not just bad trades, he'd been involved with a scheme that had collapsed spectacularly 6 months ago. The losses stretched back 18 months, accelerating as he tried to recover his initial investments. Sandra had borrowed $95,000 against a condo they owned in Hamilton, a property from before their current house. The loan application claimed renovations, but the money had disappeared into their joint account within weeks. Your son has a serious problem, Reeves said, pointing to a specific section. These aren't casual investments. He's been chasing losses, classic gambling behavior. The cryptocurrency platform he was using has been flagged by securities regulators. They've sold some of his debt to collection agencies. I studied the numbers. So if someone bought this debt, they'd have leverage over Michael. Significant leverage, especially if the buyer could threaten to expose the losses or call the debt immediately. I photographed specific pages with my phone and texted them to Chen. Can we buy this debt? Chen looked up from his computer. Potentially. These collection agencies often sell distressed debt at a discount. They'd rather get something than nothing. Make it happen. Anonymously. Over the next 2 days, Chen negotiated through legal intermediaries I'd never meet. Meanwhile, I tried to maintain normalcy. I visited my stores, reviewed inventory, met with customers, and I met Evelyn for coffee. She'd suggested a quiet cafe in the distillery district, away from my usual haunts. We talked about things unrelated to legal battles, classic films, hiking trails in Algonquin, her volunteer work with seniors services. When she laughed at my dry observations about difficult customers, something tight in my chest loosened slightly. You seem lighter today, she said, touching my forearm. Less burdened. I'm taking action, instead of just reacting. It feels different. Action is good. Her eyes were serious. But don't forget to live while you're fighting. My friend Margaret, she got so consumed with her legal battle that she forgot to enjoy anything. Don't let them steal that from you too. 2 days later, Chen called. The collection agency was motivated to sell. They'd rather have 60 cents on the dollar now than chase your son through courts. We acquired the debt for $132,000. It's now officially assigned to Morrison Holdings Trust. The paper trail is clean. Everything legal and traceable. Michael will receive notification within 48 hours that his debt has been transferred to a new creditor. I leaned back in my office chair, fingers steepled. My son owed me $220,000 and didn't know it yet. The debt gave me legal standing, the ability to call it due, the power to expose his cryptocurrency losses to courts, to Sandra's family, to anyone who might be funding their lifestyle. That evening, I met Evelyn for dinner. A small Italian place she knew in Little Italy, family-owned with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. We talked about her late husband, 4 years gone now, and my wife, who'd passed 6 years ago. Shared grief created unexpected intimacy. My phone buzzed during dessert. Chen's text. Debt acquired. Documents being filed tomorrow. I silenced the phone and turned my full attention back to Evelyn. She was describing a cottage she loved in Prince Edward County. Her hands moved as she talked, her face animated. I realized I was genuinely interested. Not strategizing, not plotting, but actually listening to another person talk about something they cared about. You should come with me sometime, she said. The fall colors are beautiful. Not too late in the season. I'd like that. Driving home later, I caught myself smiling. Not the cold satisfaction of gaining leverage over Michael, but something warmer, unexpected. Evelyn had reminded me that life existed outside this battle, that I could pursue justice and still experience moments of genuine connection, that revenge and living weren't mutually exclusive. The debt notification would reach Michael tomorrow. He'd discover that his financial leash now belonged to someone he didn't know yet. But tonight, I'd had dinner with an interesting woman who made me laugh and think and feel something other than cold calculation. Maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe the best revenge wasn't just destroying Michael's plans, but refusing to let him destroy my capacity for anything else. 2 days later, Michael received the letter. I wasn't there when it happened, but I could imagine the scene perfectly. His office cubicle downtown, probably eating lunch at his desk, signing for a registered letter without thinking much about it, then opening the envelope. Notice of debt assignment. His $220,000 cryptocurrency debt transferred to Morrison Holdings Trust. Morrison. My name. My trust. Sandra started calling an hour later. 7 calls in 20 minutes. I was at the Markham store reviewing inventory when my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. I picked it up once, saw her name, set it face down on my desk. By the 4th call, she was leaving voicemails. I listened to them later, hearing her voice shift from careful politeness to barely controlled panic. Harold, please. We need to talk about this misunderstanding. Next message, 10 minutes later. Harold, we were only trying to help. Please call me back. By the 7th, please. We can fix this. Please. I deleted them all. That afternoon, a courier delivered Chen's response to their guardianship application. I got the call from Robert an hour later. It's done, he said. Medical evaluations from Dr. Williams, Dr. Patel, and the third opinion from Dr. Nakamura at Baycrest, all 3 explicitly stating no cognitive impairment, plus the forensic analysis proving the signature forgery, and the criminal complaint filed with the Ontario Provincial Police and the Crown Attorney's Office. The letter makes it clear forging signatures on court documents is a serious criminal offense under the Criminal Code. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat at my desk for a long moment, staring at the wall calendar. The court hearing was scheduled for 3 days from now. 3 days until Michael and Sandra had to explain to a judge why they'd forged my signature, fabricated medical evidence, and attempted to steal my life's work. That evening, Evelyn arrived at my house with a bag of groceries. We'd planned to cook dinner together. Her suggestion, something about how cooking with someone tells you everything you need to know about them. She unpacked ingredients on my kitchen counter. Salmon fillets, vegetables for salad, fresh herbs from the Street Lawrence Market. I showed her how I prepared the salmon, standing close beside her, guiding her hands on the knife when she asked how to properly slice the lemon. We turned toward each other at the same moment. Her face was inches from mine. Neither of us moved away. You're good at this, she said quietly. Cooking? Being present. Despite everything else happening, I'd told her about acquiring Michael's debt earlier. Not boasting, but explaining my strategy. She'd listened without judgment, her hand resting on my forearm. You're protecting yourself, she'd said. That's not the same as cruelty. Now, in my kitchen, with flour on her hands and laughter in her eyes, when I accidentally knocked over a spice jar, I realized something startling. I hadn't thought about Michael or the court case for nearly an hour. The longest break my mind had taken in 2 weeks. We cooked together in comfortable rhythm, occasionally bumping shoulders, passing ingredients without needing to ask. The salmon came out perfectly. The salad was crisp and bright. We ate at my dining table, talking about everything except legal battles. Her social work stories, my hardware store adventures, shared memories of cottage country summers. After dinner, we washed dishes side by side. I washed, she dried. I told her about Michael receiving the debt notification. What are you planning to do with it? She asked, casual tone masking a serious question. My hands stilled in the soapy water. Use it as leverage. Make him understand he can't destroy people without consequences. And after the court case, I met her eyes. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to forgive him. Part of me wants to watch him fail. I haven't decided which part wins. She touched my arm gently. That's honest. I appreciate honest. We finished the dishes in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. When she left around 10, she squeezed my hand at the door. See you Saturday? We could visit that gallery I mentioned, the McMichael collection. I'd like that. I watched her drive away, then returned to my kitchen. The space still smelled like herbs and lemon. 2 wine glasses sat drying on the rack, Evidence of an evening that had nothing to do with revenge or justice or court battles. Evidence that I was still capable of something other than cold calculation. My phone buzzed. A text from Chen. Michael and Sandra will receive the criminal investigation notice tomorrow morning. Expect reactions. I set the phone aside and walked to my back window. The ravine stretched dark beyond my yard, city lights twinkling in the distance. Let them panic, I thought. Let them understand what it feels like to watch your life come apart because of someone else's choices. But standing there in my kitchen that still carried the warmth of Evelyn's laughter, I realized something unexpected. Their panic didn't give me the satisfaction I'd anticipated. What gave me satisfaction was the salmon dinner, the shared dishwashing, the comfortable silence. Revenge was necessary, but it wasn't enough. I was learning the difference. 4 days later, on Saturday morning, I watched through my front window as Michael's car pulled into my driveway. I'd been drinking coffee, enjoying the quiet before Evelyn and I were supposed to visit the gallery. Now I set the mug down carefully and observed. Sandra sat in the passenger seat, shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths, composing herself. Michael checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting his collar. They were preparing for a performance. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recording app. Ontario was a one-party consent province. I could legally record any conversation I participated in. I tested it briefly, speaking my name, playing it back. Clear audio. I started a new recording and slipped the phone into my shirt pocket, microphone facing outward. Then I opened the door. "Dad," Michael tried to smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Can we talk, please?" I stepped aside, letting them enter. We settled in my living room. Me in my armchair, them on the couch facing me. Sandra clutched a tissue. Michael sat forward, hands clasped. "Harold, we made terrible mistakes." Sandra's voice trembled. "We were scared of losing you, scared of what would happen to the family business. We went about it all wrong." I said nothing, just watched. Michael leaned forward. "Dad, I know what the documents say, but it wasn't meant to hurt you. We thought we were protecting the family assets. I should have talked to you directly. So filing for guardianship was protection." My voice was flat, emotionless. "We were trying to help." Sandra's tears came on cue, but I noticed she'd been holding the same tissue for 10 minutes without actually using it. "You're alone, managing everything by yourself. We thought. You thought you'd take it all without asking." Silence. Michael's eyes darted to Sandra, back to me, searching for signs of softening that didn't come. 40 minutes of this. Apologies that sounded rehearsed. Explanations that shifted from misunderstanding to concern for your welfare to increasingly desperate justifications. I sat perfectly still, hands resting on the armrests. Occasionally I nodded slightly, encouraging them to keep talking. They filled every silence, each word digging them deeper. Sandra paced now, frustrated by my lack of response. Her carefully constructed narrative was cracking. "We didn't want to deceive you," she burst out suddenly. "We just thought you would give us the business yourself. You're getting older, and we're family." It made sense. Why fight us when you could have just transitioned things peacefully? There it was, the truth under the performance. Michael tried to recover. "We needed the money so badly. You don't understand the pressure we've been under." I stood. "The court hearing is in 3 days. You can explain all of this to the judge. I'm sure they'll find your reasoning compelling." Sandra's face went white. "Harold, please." "I think you should leave now." They left. Michael looked back once from the doorway, mouth opening like he might say something else. Then he just turned and walked to the car. I stood at my door for several minutes after they drove away, watching the empty street. Then I walked to my office, connected my phone to my computer, and backed up the recording to 3 locations: hard drive, cloud storage, USB drive in my safe. Their own words, admitting they'd expected me to simply hand over my business, that they'd needed the money badly enough to commit fraud. Evelyn arrived an hour later. I was still in my office when she knocked. "Hey," she said, reading my face immediately. "What happened?" I showed her to my back patio, instead of suggesting we leave for the gallery. We sat in chairs overlooking the ravine, bare November trees stark against the gray sky. I didn't speak at first. Neither did she. We just existed in shared silence. Finally, I told her about Michael and Sandra's visit. Then I played her the recording. She listened without interrupting. When it finished, she took my hand. "You could have yelled," she said quietly. "You could have said horrible things. You didn't. You let them convict themselves with their own words. I'm proud of you." I wanted to scream at them. My voice was tight. "Tell them exactly what I think of their betrayal. But you didn't, because you're better than they are." Something in my chest loosened. Evelyn saw it. The moment I'd been holding together through sheer will, suddenly safe to fall apart slightly. She moved closer on the patio bench. "You don't have to be strong every second. Not with me." I looked at her. Really looked. The silver in her hair catching the weak November sunlight, the kindness in her eyes that didn't come from naivety, but from having seen enough of life's cruelty to value its rare moments of tenderness. "Thank you," I said, "for being here, for understanding why I had to let them hang themselves." "I understand justice," she replied. "I understand boundaries, and I understand that you're one of the good ones, Harold Morrison." We sat there for another hour, talking and not talking, her hand in mine. At some point, I told her about my wife, how she'd passed 6 years ago, how I'd thought that part of my life was over. "Maybe it doesn't have to be," Evelyn said softly. I turned toward her. She turned toward me, and then we were kissing. It was gentle, tentative. Two people who'd forgotten what this felt like, rediscovering it together. When we pulled apart, she smiled. "I've wanted to do that since the community garden." "Why didn't you?" "You had enough happening. I wanted to wait until you had space in your life for something good." I touched her face. "I have space now." The court hearing was in 3 days. Michael and Sandra would face a judge with their forged documents and fabricated evidence. I had medical reports, forensic analysis, recorded admissions, and a criminal complaint filed with the authorities. But sitting on my patio, with Evelyn's hand in mine, tasting her kiss on my lips, I realized the most important victory wasn't in that courtroom. It was here, now. Reclaiming my capacity for connection, for tenderness, for hope. Michael had tried to take my life. Instead, I'd found a new reason to live it. 3 days later, I walked up the courthouse steps in downtown Toronto with Robert Chen on my left and Evelyn on my right. Monday morning, 10 o'clock. The stone building loomed against a gray November sky, the first snowflakes of winter drifting down. "Ready?" Chen asked, adjusting his briefcase. Evelyn squeezed my hand. I nodded. We passed through security, navigated hallways that echoed with our footsteps, and found courtroom 401. Michael and Sandra were already seated at the applicant's table with their lawyer, a nervous-looking man named David Thornton, who kept shuffling papers like he could reorganize them into a winning case. Justice Margaret O'Brien entered at exactly 10, late 50s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of my best high school teacher. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. "Let's proceed. Mr. Thornton, your client filed this guardianship application. Present your case." Thornton stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we believe Mr. Harold Morrison requires assistance managing his affairs. While recent medical evaluations show current capacity, we're concerned about long-term patterns documented where?" Justice O'Brien interrupted. "Well, that is, we have witness testimony that—" "From whom?" Thornton faltered. "The applicant and his wife observed concerning behaviors. The same applicant who would benefit financially from this guardianship." The judge's tone could have cut glass. "Continue." I watched Michael across the courtroom. His jaw was clenched tight. Sandra stared at the table. Chen stood when his turn came. He presented evidence methodically, like dealing cards in a winning hand. Medical evaluations from 3 independent physicians: Dr. Williams, Dr. Patel, Dr. Nakamura. Each report explicit, no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Then the forensic document analysis. Chen displayed the forged signature alongside my genuine ones on the courtroom screen. Even I could see the difference. The wrong angle on the H. The too tight loop on the M, Mr. Thornton, Justice O'Brien said, studying the comparison. Your client submitted a consent form with what your own expert witness now admits appears to be a forged signature. How do you explain this? Thornton stammered. Your Honor, there may have been administrative confusion. Perhaps Mr. Morrison signed a different document. Administrative confusion doesn't explain 3 different forensic analysts, all concluding this signature is fraudulent. She looked at Chen. Is there more? Yes, Your Honor. An audio recording made legally under Ontario's one-party consent law. I watched Michael's eyes close as Chen played it. The courtroom speakers broadcast every word. Sandra's voice. We didn't want to deceive you. We just thought you would give us the business yourself. You're getting older, and we're family. It made sense. Michael's voice. We needed the money so badly. You don't understand. The silence after it finished was absolute. Justice O'Brien removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly, replaced them. When she spoke, her voice was cold and precise. This application is dismissed with costs. Mr. Morrison, I apologize that the court's time was wasted with this matter. Mr. Michael Morrison, you are ordered to pay the respondent's legal costs in full, $18,000. Additionally, I'm forwarding this evidence to the Crown Attorney for review of possible criminal charges. The gavel came down. Case closed. I stood, shook Chen's hand. Evelyn smiled at me. Not triumphant, just present. We walked toward the exit together. Behind us, I heard Michael's chair scrape back. Footsteps. His voice, loud and desperate in the courthouse hallway. Dad, wait. We're still family. You can't just cut us off. Dad. I didn't turn around. Evelyn's hand was in mine, steady and warm. Keep walking, I said quietly. We kept walking. In the parking lot, I stopped beside my car and looked back at the building. Michael stood on the courthouse steps, Sandra pulling at his arm, trying to lead him away. He looked small from this distance. Defeated, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction in his failure, just relief that it was over. Evelyn leaned against me. How do you feel? Tired, I said honestly, and ready to start thinking about something other than court cases. Good. She kissed my cheek. Because I have some ideas about that. We drove home through Toronto traffic, the first real snow of winter starting to fall. For the first time in weeks, I didn't think about revenge or justice or legal strategies. I thought about what came next, what I wanted to build instead of what I needed to protect. The war was over. I'd won. Now I needed to figure out what victory actually meant. The morning after the hearing, I gathered my 4 store managers in my office at the Markham location. Dave Rodriguez, who'd been with me for 15 years. Linda Chen, operations manager, for 10. Tom Bradley, purchasing for 8. Sarah Williams, the newest, but sharp as anyone. I'm stepping back, I told them. Not selling, not closing, just stepping back. Dave grinned. About time, boss. I built this business over 35 years. It's been my life. I paused. But I realized something recently. It shouldn't be my entire life. You all keep it running. I'm just making it official. I'd already hired a professional manager through Chen's connections, someone to handle daily operations while I transitioned to a consulting role, available for major decisions, but no longer managing every detail. I walked through the store that afternoon, stopping at each aisle to shake hands with employees who'd worked for me for years, some for decades, thanking them, explaining that wages and benefits wouldn't change, watching their concern transform into genuine happiness for me. 2 days later, I met Michael at a coffee shop in Unionville, neutral territory, a corner table by the window where we could talk privately. He arrived 10 minutes late, looking exhausted. The confident swagger I remembered was gone, replaced by someone who'd lost everything and knew it. I had 3 documents ready. I slid the first across the table. Debt forgiveness. The $220,000 I paid for your cryptocurrency debt. Forgiven. His eyes widened. The second document. A check for $50,000. Payable to your creditors. Not to you directly. To clear your other obligations. He reached for it. I held up the third document. In exchange, proof of enrollment in a certified financial counseling program, plus documented employment within 60 days. I slid the final paper across. And this. My updated estate plan. He read it. His face went white. You're leaving everything to a charity? The Canadian Cancer Society, in your mother's memory, and a fund for seniors' services, people who need help, not people who tried to steal from me. You're cutting me out completely. His voice rose. After everything? You're destroying our family. I didn't destroy anything. You did that when you tried to have me declared incompetent. I kept my voice level. I'm giving you more than you deserve. Take it or face criminal prosecution. Your choice. The anger drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. He stared at the documents, hands shaking. What if I fail? What if I can't? Then you fail. But you'll fail as your own man, not as someone waiting for their father to die so they can inherit his life's work. He signed all 3 documents. His signature looked nothing like the forgery he'd submitted to the court. Smaller, defeated, but genuine. I left the coffee shop lighter than when I'd entered. That chapter was closed. Michael had a chance to rebuild his life on his own terms. Whether he took it or not wasn't my responsibility anymore. 2 days later, Evelyn and I loaded her car with weekend bags and a cooler of sandwiches. We were taking her car, not my truck. A deliberate choice. Ready for an adventure? She asked, sliding into the driver's seat. More than ready. We drove east toward Prince Edward County. Evelyn's hand rested on my knee while I watched the gray November landscape roll past, the last stubborn leaves clinging to bare branches. We stopped for lunch in Belleville, switched drivers, and she fell asleep in the passenger seat somewhere past Picton. I glanced at her peaceful face, then back at the road ahead. This was the first time in weeks I'd thought about the future instead of the past. We reached the county by late afternoon, found a small inn near the shore of Lake Ontario. As sunset approached, we walked along the rocky beach, coats pulled tight against the November wind, waves lapping at the gray stones beneath our feet. Evelyn leaned against my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said quietly, giving him a chance, but not rescuing him. I kept thinking about what you said about your friend Margaret, how the fight almost consumed her. I watched a seagull wheel overhead. I don't want to be consumed. I want to live. She squeezed my hand. Then let's live. The sun descended toward the lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, reflected in the cold November water. I watched the horizon and understood with absolute clarity. Winning wasn't about defeating Michael. It was about reclaiming my right to choose my own life. I'd protected what I built, secured my legacy, given my son a chance at redemption while maintaining boundaries that honored my own worth. But the real victory was standing here with Evelyn, feeling the lake wind on my face, planning weekend trips and quiet dinners and lazy Sunday mornings instead of court strategies and evidence collection. True freedom wasn't about destroying toxic people. It was about choosing to walk away from them and towards something better. What are you thinking? Evelyn asked. I pulled her closer. That I spent 2 months fighting for justice, and I won. But this, right now, this is what winning actually feels like. She smiled. Good, because this is just the beginning. The waves lapped at the shore. The sun set over Lake Ontario. The cold November wind carried the promise of winter, and somewhere behind me, Toronto and all its battles felt very, very far away. I'd survived my son's betrayal, built defenses, fought in court, offered mercy with boundaries. Now I was free to do the only thing that ever really mattered. Live well. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.